In a peaceful village nestled near a dense forest, life seemed to unfold in harmony, with humans and wildlife living separately but occasionally crossing paths. The forest, vast and unyielding, stretched endlessly, a kingdom of towering trees, rustling leaves, and quiet whispers of the wild. Among its residents was Luna, a brave mother bear who called the forest her home. She lived there with her young cub, a small ball of fur and energy, who was still learning the ways of the world. The forest, with its towering pines and thick underbrush, was both their sanctuary and their challenge, as they navigated the delicate balance between survival and safety. Luna was a mother in the truest sense. Every decision she made, every step she took, was for her cub's well-being. She knew the dangers of the forest, the predators, the harsh weather, and the unpredictability of life, but nothing mattered more than ensuring her cub grew strong and wise. Not far from the forest's edge, in a cozy cottage at the village's outskirts, lived a little girl named Emily. At only 5 years old, Emily was curious beyond measure. She was the type of child who always seemed to have a question on her lips, a thought constantly bubbling to the surface. Her parents, though loving, were often busy with their own work, her father tending to the farm and her mother managing the household. They trusted Emily to explore on her own, a freedom she relished. Little did they know, Emily's explorations often took her to the very edge of the forest. She had a fascination with the wild, the creatures that roamed just beyond the trees. The boundary between the village and the forest was a place where Emily felt a strange sense of wonder. On many of her walks, Emily would venture to the forest's edge, where the tall trees seemed to whisper secrets to her. There, she would sit and watch, hoping to catch a glimpse of the animals that made the forest their home. Sometimes, she would spot a deer or hear the chirp of birds overhead. But one day, as she wandered deeper into the forest than usual, she saw something far more remarkable: Luna, the bear mother, standing among the trees. Emily was not afraid. She had heard stories from the village about bears, about their strength and their quiet presence in the woods. But to Emily, Luna wasn't a frightening creature. Instead, she was something to admire, a mother just like her own. From a distance, Emily watched, her eyes wide with awe as Luna moved gracefully through the underbrush, her cub following closely behind. It was a rare sight, and Emily, filled with wonder, returned home with a heart full of stories, though she never mentioned her encounter to anyone. Luna, for her part, had seen Emily from afar as well. While Luna's world was one of survival, she wasn't oblivious to the humans who lived on the fringes of her domain. She had watched the village from a distance, noticing the small figure of the girl who wandered near the trees. At first, Luna was cautious. The presence of humans always brought a sense of uncertainty. They were unpredictable, sometimes kind, sometimes harmful, but something about Emily intrigued her. The child didn't show fear. Luna could sense that Emily was not a threat, but rather, a curious soul, much like herself. Over time, Emily's visits to the forest became more frequent. Each time, she would venture closer to the trees, always looking for new signs of wildlife. She never ventured too far, aware of the dangers that might lie deeper within. But her curiosity kept her coming back. Day after day, Luna, sensing the girl's growing presence, would watch over her from the shadows, a silent guardian of sorts, ensuring that Emily remained safe from the true dangers of the forest. Despite the occasional glances they exchanged, neither Luna nor Emily made any move to approach one another directly. Luna, though curious, knew the risks of drawing too close to humans. And Emily, with her innocent heart, did not fully understand the complexities of the forest world. The two existed in parallel, each observing the other from a distance, silently acknowledging the bond that was slowly forming between them, a bond forged by the shared space they both occupied. At home, Emily's parents remained unaware of their daughter's secret friendship with the forest. Her mother often called her in as the sun began to set. But Emily never showed any sign of fear when returning from the edge of the trees. She was simply content, full of stories that never quite made sense to anyone else. Emily's parents assumed it was just the imagination of a child at play. They trusted that the forest, while vast, was not dangerous for someone as small as their daughter. After all, they had lived alongside it for years without incident. They couldn't fathom that, in those quiet moments when Emily played near the trees, she was unknowingly watched over by a mother bear. But the truth was that the forest was both a place of beauty and peril. A world of hidden dangers that lurked in the shadows. While Luna protected her cub with fierce devotion, the world outside the forest was far less predictable. There were poachers, and wildfires, and changes in the environment that could threaten their peaceful life. Yet for now, in this small part of the world, the forest and the village coexisted, with Emily and Luna quietly navigating their own lives at the edges of each other's worlds. The bond between the curious little girl and the brave bear mother remained unspoken. Yet it was there, woven into the fabric of the forest itself. It was a bond built on shared curiosity, mutual respect, and the silent understanding that both were part of something larger than themselves. The forest, with its mysteries and dangers, was a place where both the wild and the innocent could exist side by side, connected by the quiet, unspoken threads of the world around them. One summer afternoon, the sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm golden light over the village and the forest that bordered it. The sounds of birds chirping and leaves rustling in the gentle breeze were all that could be heard in the quiet of the day. Emily's parents, as they often did, had to leave the house for errands, leaving their daughter behind in the care of her own imagination. Emily, ever curious and full of energy, was used to being on her own for short stretches of time. But today, something was different. Today, her curiosity would lead her into an accident she would never forget. Inside the small cottage, Emily wandered from room to room, her small fingers brushing against the furniture as she explored every corner of the house. She had always been fascinated by the little things. The objects her parents kept on shelves. The trinkets they placed on the mantel. Today, however, it was a simple candle on the kitchen table that caught her attention. Its soft, flickering flame danced in the dim light of the room. Emily, being the curious little girl she was, moved closer, watching the flame mesmerized by its movement. Without thinking, she reached up, her tiny hand extending toward the candle. She wanted to touch it, to feel the warmth of the flame against her skin. But as she did, her hand brushed against the candle holder, sending it toppling off the table. The candle, no longer steady, rolled off the edge of the table and landed on the floor, its small flame flickering dangerously near the edge of the rug. Within moments, the flame found its way to the fabric of the curtains hanging by the window, igniting them in a rush of heat. The fire spread quickly, curling around the fabric of the curtains, licking at the walls, and sending smoke curling up toward the ceiling. Emily's wide eyes went from the flames to the thick smoke that began filling the room. Her small hands trembled as she tried to move. But the heat was intense, and the smoke made it hard for her to see. Panic surged through her chest as she realized the danger she was in. The fire was too big for her to put out. The smoke was choking her, making it harder to breathe. She tried to call out for help, but the sound of her voice was drowned out by the crackling of the fire and the rush of smoke. As the flames grew higher, Emily stumbled toward the door, but the heat from the fire was overwhelming. She turned back, desperate, trying to find a way out. But the smoke was now so thick that she could barely see her own hands in front of her face. Fear gripped her heart as she realized that she was trapped. The door was too far, and the windows were too high for her to reach. Her parents were not home, and there was no one else to help. She was alone, and the fire was spreading quickly. But out in the woods, Luna, the mother bear, was on her own hunt for food. She had ventured far from her usual haunts, following the scent of a deer that had wandered too close to her territory. Her keen nose picked up the scents of the forest, the moss, the pine needles, and the faint trace of other animals. But then, as she padded quietly through the underbrush, a new scent hit her nose. It was a sharp, acrid smell, a burning smell. Luna paused, sniffing the air, her ears pricked with alertness. It wasn't the usual forest fire scent. This was different. It was the smell of something unnatural, something burning out of control. Her instincts told her something was wrong, and she followed the scent, her thick paws moving swiftly through the trees. The smell grew stronger as she neared the village. Soon, she could see smoke rising in the distance, curling up into the sky. It was thick, dark, and heavy, and Luna's heart quickened. She knew the village was not far from the forest, and now she feared that something had gone terribly wrong. Luna's eyes narrowed, and she moved faster, following the smoke. As she neared the village, the smell of fire grew stronger, and she could feel the heat in the air. She slowed, moving cautiously, her senses heightened. She was careful, knowing that humans often panicked in these situations. But when Luna reached the edge of the village, her eyes locked on the source of the smoke. There, in the distance, she saw the cottage where Emily lived. Flames were pouring from the windows, and smoke was billowing out in thick clouds. Luna's heart sank. She didn't know for sure that Emily was inside, but the signs were clear. A fire had broken out, and the smoke made it clear that the situation was dire. Without a second thought, Luna charged forward, moving toward the house with determination. She was no stranger to danger, and her protective instincts for her own cub surged to the forefront. She had to act quickly. The fire was too big for Emily to handle alone, and the child was small and helpless against the flames. Luna's massive form was quick and sure as she approached the cottage. When she reached the house, she hesitated for a brief moment, unsure of how to proceed. The fire was raging, and there was no easy way in. But then, with a deep breath, Luna made her move. She charged through the front door, her strong body slamming into it with enough force to break it open. Inside, the smoke was thick, and the heat was unbearable. But Luna moved through it with purpose. She could hear the faint sound of Emily's coughs in the air, and the desperation in the girl's voice spurred Luna on. Luna's sharp eyes scanned the room. Finding Emily huddled in a corner, choking on the smoke, the girl was terrified, her small body trembling with fear. Without hesitation, Luna moved toward her, carefully scooping Emily up in her large, strong paws. The bear's protective instinct kicked in, and she cradled the girl gently but firmly, carrying her out of the burning house with surprising ease. Luna's heart pounded as she made her way back into the cool air outside. She had saved Emily, but there was no time to waste. The fire was still raging behind them, and Luna's job wasn't done. She carried the girl into the forest, away from the danger, making sure to keep her safe. As they made their way deeper into the forest, Emily's cough subsided, and she looked up at Luna with wide, grateful eyes. The bear mother, her body covered in soot and ash, looked down at the child with a quiet understanding. They had both made it through the fire, and in that moment, Luna knew that her bond with Emily had deepened in a way neither of them could have ever imagined. Back in the village, the fire would eventually be put out, and Emily's parents would return to find their daughter safe and sound. But for Emily and Luna, this would be a day they would never forget, the day when a brave bear mother saved a curious little girl from the flames. Luna's heart raced as she reached the cottage, the smoke thick and choking, swirling in the air like a sinister cloud. She could hear Emily's faint cries in the distance, the desperation in the girl's voice fueling Luna's every step. The fire had spread fast, and time was running out. Luna had no idea how much longer Emily could survive in that thick, suffocating smoke. But she wasn't about to stand by. She had to act quickly. The sight of the house was heart-wrenching. Flames licked at the windows, hungrily devouring everything in their path. But through the smoke, Luna could make out the small, trembling figure of Emily, standing by the window, her tiny hands pressed against the glass. The girl was crying, unable to escape the fiery inferno that surrounded her. Panic gripped Luna's chest as she realized that the window was too small for Emily to get through, and the front door was already blocked by flames. Without hesitation, Luna sprang into action. She was powerful, built for survival, and now that strength was all that mattered. She charged toward the house with a force that shook the ground beneath her, her massive form a blur against the smoke and fire. She slammed into the front door, her body colliding with the wood in a roar of power. The door splintered, the hinges giving way to her immense strength. Luna didn't wait for the door to fully collapse. She pushed through the opening, her large paws moving swiftly over the floor of the house, her nose keenly searching for Emily. The smoke was thick, so dense that it was almost impossible to see. Luna's sharp senses, honed by years of navigating the forest, guided her. She could smell the burning wood, feel the heat rising around her. But above it all, she could hear the soft, frightened sobs of the little girl. Emily was still there, still waiting for someone to come to her rescue. Luna's eyes locked on the figure of Emily, still at the window, her face streaked with tears. The child was trapped, helpless and afraid, unable to find her way out. Luna could see that Emily was struggling, her small body shaking with fear, unable to move beyond the thick smoke that surrounded her. Luna moved forward, her large, powerful paws taking careful steps toward the girl. The heat was unbearable now, the fire dangerously close, but Luna pushed on, her protective instincts overriding any fear. She reached Emily, and without hesitation, she gently nudged the girl with her strong, warm body, trying to shield her from the intense heat and smoke. Emily, startled at first, looked up to find the massive bear standing before her, her eyes wide with fear and amazement. Luna didn't wait for the girl to react. With a swift, gentle motion, Luna bent down and grasped the fabric of Emily's shirt with her teeth. She was careful not to hurt the girl but strong enough to lift her away from the window. With a swift movement, she began to pull Emily toward the door, away from the smoke and fire that threatened to consume them both. Emily let out a startled cry, but Luna's powerful paws were steady, and the bear mother's instincts kept them moving. Luna could feel the heat growing as the fire continued to rage behind them. She was nearly at the door when the weight of the smoke became unbearable. The air was thick and heavy, making it difficult for Luna to see. She could hear the sound of crackling flames getting closer, but she was determined. Just as Luna was about to push through the smoke and get Emily to safety, a sudden burst of heat forced her to stop. She hesitated, her body instinctively retreating from the door as the flames seemed to roar higher. But she didn't let go of Emily. She held the girl tightly, covering her with her body, using her own bulk to protect the little one from the flames that now filled the room. Luna stood firm, her body blocking the fire's path. Her head turned to shield Emily from the worst of the smoke. The heat was unbearable, but Luna's strength kept them both safe. If only for a moment longer. She could feel Emily's small body trembling beneath her, and it was that trembling that urged Luna to act faster. There was no time to waste. Then, from outside, a voice rang out. Luna's sharp ears perked up. It was the sound of people shouting, the distant noise of neighbors who had finally noticed the fire. Fire! Fire! Someone shouted, and Luna's heart surged with hope. The villagers had seen the smoke, and now they were coming to help. At the sound of the voices, Luna shifted her weight, careful not to crush Emily in the process. She used her immense strength to push through the door once again, her body moving forward despite the raging flames around them. The heat pressed against them like an invisible wall. But Luna kept going, her resolve unyielding. She couldn't let anything happen to Emily. Outside, the villagers were now gathering, rushing toward the house with buckets of water and anything else they could use to stop the flames. Luna could see them moving in the distance, a glimmer of hope breaking through the smoky haze. But she wasn't finished yet. Her first priority was getting Emily to safety. With a powerful push, Luna stepped out of the burning house, her thick fur singed from the flames but still holding strong. Emily was safe in her grasp, her tiny arms wrapped tightly around the bear's neck, clinging to her as if her life depended on it, which, in that moment, it did. The villagers arrived just in time to see Luna emerging from the smoke, the brave mother bear cradling Emily in her massive paws. The sight stopped them in their tracks. Some gasped, others shouted in awe, but none dared to move too quickly. They knew the bear was not an enemy. She had saved the little girl. And as they rushed to extinguish the remaining flames, they also ensured that Emily and Luna were both safe. Luna carefully lowered Emily to the ground once they were far enough from the fire. The little girl looked up at the bear with wide, tear-filled eyes, her small chest heaving with emotion. But there was no fear in her gaze now, only gratitude. She reached out a small hand to touch Luna's paw, and the bear, her heart swelling with affection, gently nudged the girl in return. The fire was soon under control, and the villagers were left in awe of the incredible courage Luna had shown. They knew they would never forget the day a bear had saved a child. Her strength and bravery leaving an indelible mark on everyone who had witnessed it. As for Emily, she would always remember the great bear that had protected her, her silent guardian in the face of danger. A friend she would never forget. As Luna carefully lowered Emily to the ground, the little girl clung to her tightly, her small hands wrapped around the bear's thick fur. The fear that had gripped her moments earlier was still evident in her wide eyes. But the warmth and protection Luna offered provided a sense of safety. Emily trembled as the adrenaline from the danger of the fire slowly ebbed away. And in that moment, all she could do was hold on to the bear that had saved her life. To Emily, Luna wasn't just an animal, she was a protector. A friend who had stood between her and certain harm. Luna, for her part, stood still, her massive form ever watchful, her eyes soft as she gazed down at the little girl who had come to mean so much in such a short time. She could feel the child's fear, but also the bond that was forming between them. The bear had saved her. Yes, but it was more than just the physical act of rescue. Luna had instinctively understood what was needed in that moment. And it had been her presence, her courage, that had pulled Emily from the brink of disaster. It wasn't long before the villagers arrived. At first, they froze, taking in the sight of the bear so close to the little girl. A few of them stepped back, their eyes wide with fear. It was unusual to see a bear so close to the village, especially one so large and formidable. For a moment, the situation seemed dangerous. They had all heard the stories of wild animals in the forest, of their unpredictability and potential threat. But as they watched, they noticed something extraordinary. Emily, who had once been a mere figure in the distance, was now standing, not cowering, beside the bear. She wasn't frightened, she was safe, and as they watched, they could see that the bear wasn't an aggressor. Luna stood quietly, watching the people with calm eyes, her massive form poised but not threatening. The villagers began to realize that the bear was not here to harm anyone. In fact, she had just saved the life of a child. A collective gasp ran through the crowd as the realization sank in. Luna hadn't just been near Emily, she had been the one to pull the girl from the fire. She had broken down the door, fought through the smoke, and carefully carried Emily to safety. The villagers began to murmur among themselves, voices full of awe and gratitude. How many times had they feared the bears that roamed the forest, never imagining that one of them would come to their aid. An elderly woman, who had lived in the village all her life, was the first to speak. She saved her, she whispered, a sense of disbelief in her voice. The bear, she saved the little one. Her words hung in the air, and the others nodded in stunned silence, some of them still too shocked to fully comprehend what had happened. As the crowd began to settle, the local farmer, an older man who had seen his fair share of strange occurrences in the forest, stepped forward. He had witnessed the bear's bravery firsthand. "I've lived near this forest for years," he said, his voice gruff but full of respect. "I've always been wary of the bears. But what I saw today was something else. This bear, Luna, she didn't just protect that child. She fought against the fire to save her. She's no ordinary bear." The villagers, now recognizing the gravity of the situation, began to offer their thanks. One by one, they approached Luna, not in fear but with a mixture of awe and gratitude. They offered words of thanks, but it was clear that their words couldn't fully capture the depth of their appreciation for the bear's actions. Meanwhile, Emily's parents had just returned. They had been gone for hours, unaware of the fire, unaware of the danger their daughter had been in. As they approached their cottage, they could see the remnants of the smoke curling into the sky. The village was filled with an unusual hush, and as they walked closer, they saw a crowd gathered near the house. They quickened their pace, anxiety rising in their chests. Had something happened to Emily? Was she okay? When they reached the group, they were stunned to find Emily standing there, looking up at Luna, her arms still wrapped around the bear's neck. The sight was almost too much to take in. There, standing in front of them, was Luna, the bear they had always feared. But Emily wasn't afraid. Emily was safe. And as Emily's parents took in the scene, they slowly realized what had happened. The bear had saved their daughter. Emily, her mother cried, rushing forward and pulling her daughter into her arms. Emily clung to her, the comfort of her mother's embrace providing a sense of relief after the terror she had just faced. Her father stood beside them, equally shaken, but his gaze shifted to the bear. He didn't speak at first. He simply watched Luna, who stood a few paces away, watching them with quiet eyes. "Luna, you saved her," the father said, his voice thick with emotion. He looked at the bear as if seeing her for the first time. As if he were coming to understand something he never thought possible. "Thank you," he added quietly, his voice almost a whisper. The mother, still holding Emily, looked at Luna with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. She had always heard stories of wild animals in the forest, but never had she imagined that one would save her child's life. How did you do it?" she asked, as though trying to make sense of the impossible. Luna, of course, did not answer. She was not a creature of words, but her gaze spoke volumes. She had done what she had to do. She had protected Emily because it was the right thing to do. And now, her job was done. As the villagers continued to gather around, the fire finally extinguished by the combined efforts of the community, Emily's parents turned to them in gratitude. The elderly woman who had first spoken approached them, her voice gentle but full of admiration. "You're fortunate," she said, her eyes softening as she looked at the family. "That bear, Luna, she's a hero." The word hung in the air, and for the first time, Emily's parents truly understood its weight. They were grateful, not just for the safety of their daughter, but for Luna's bravery. The villagers shared stories of the bear's actions, of how she had come into the fire, saved Emily, and carried her to safety. It was a story that would be told for generations. That day, the village would never be the same. The bond between humans and the creatures of the forest had shifted. Luna was no longer seen as a threat, but as a protector. She had earned the respect and gratitude of the villagers. And in return, they promised to be more mindful of the delicate balance between the forest and their own lives. As for Emily, she would grow up never forgetting the bear that saved her. Luna, once a figure of myth and fear, had become a quiet friend, a silent guardian watching over her from the edges of the forest. And though the story of the fire would fade over time, the lesson it taught would remain, that sometimes, even in the wildest corners of the world, unexpected heroes emerge when you least expect them. As the days passed, the events of that summer afternoon became a story retold in every corner of the village. Luna, the brave bear who had saved Emily's life, had become more than just a creature of the forest. She was a symbol of courage and unconditional love. A reminder that even in the wildest places, there are moments of grace. Moments when an unexpected hero emerges to protect those in need. On the day after the fire, as the village began to recover, Luna made her way back to the forest. She had done what she needed to do. She had protected Emily, saved her from the flames, and ensured her safety. The bear's heart, strong and steady, felt a quiet peace as she walked through the woods, her cub following close behind. It had been a dangerous act, one that had required every ounce of her strength. But she had done it instinctively, as any mother would. Now, her work was done. The forest called her back, a place where she and her cub could return to the familiar sounds of rustling leaves, the cool shade of the trees, and the safety of the wild. Emily, though, could not forget the bear. She thought about Luna every day, even after the danger had passed and the fire was nothing but a memory. The image of the bear, standing tall and strong, remained in her heart. Emily remembered the feel of Luna's fur, the warmth and protection that the bear had given her in her darkest moment. She would never forget how Luna had saved her life. As the weeks turned into months, Emily began to make her way to the edge of the forest more frequently. She would bring with her baskets of fruit, apples, berries, and other sweet offerings from her garden. It was her way of saying thank you to the bear who had done so much for her. She didn't know exactly where Luna lived, but she had learned to leave the food near the forest's edge, where she had first seen the bear. Emily hoped that one day Luna would find it, and maybe, just maybe, she would know that the girl had not forgotten. Each time Emily returned home, she felt a sense of peace. She knew the bear was out there, somewhere in the woods, and that made her feel safe. She had come to think of Luna as a friend, and the thought of her watching over the forest gave her comfort. Meanwhile, the village had begun to change. Too, the residents had seen the bear in a new light. Luna was no longer something to fear but something to respect. The villagers had always lived with the forest on the edge of their lives. But now they saw it as more than just a backdrop. It was a living, breathing part of their world, one that deserved care and understanding. They began to talk more about living in harmony with the wild, about protecting the forest, its animals, and its delicate balance. Many of the villagers, once wary of the animals that lived in the woods, started to see them differently. They understood that the creatures of the forest, like Luna, had a role to play in the world, a role that was vital to the health of the ecosystem. They no longer saw animals as threats to their safety or their crops, but as part of the larger web of life that connected them all. The story of Luna and Emily spread quickly, and before long, it became a symbol of courage and compassion in the village. The tale of brave Mama Bear, as the villagers called her, was told and retold at gatherings and around hearths. It became a story of hope, of how an animal, driven by love and courage, could make a difference in a world that often seemed unpredictable and dangerous. Every year, on the anniversary of the fire, the villagers gathered together at the edge of the forest. They held a small ceremony, where they would light a candle in honor of Luna's bravery. It wasn't a grand affair, but it was meaningful. It was a way for them to show their gratitude to the bear who had saved Emily and to remind themselves of the deep connection they had with the natural world. As for Emily, she grew up with a deep appreciation for the animals and the forest that surrounded her village. Her parents, once unaware of the bear's protective nature, had come to understand the importance of respecting the creatures of the wild. They too saw how the village had changed, how it had become a place where people and nature coexisted more harmoniously. They encouraged Emily's visits to the forest, knowing that it had shaped her into a kind and compassionate young woman who valued all living things. The bond between Emily and Luna, though unspoken, remained strong. Emily never saw Luna again after that day. But she didn't need to. She knew the bear was out there, in the depths of the forest, watching over the land, just as she had watched over Emily. And in Emily's heart, Luna would always be her hero, her protector, the one who had stood between her and the fire and given her a second chance at life. The story of the brave mama bear had become more than just a tale of survival. It was a reminder to the villagers of the power of kindness, of the importance of standing up for those in need, and of the unspoken bond that exists between humans and the natural world. It was a story that carried with it a message of hope and love, one that would live on for generations to come. In the end, Luna's act of bravery had done more than save a life. It had changed a village, opened hearts, and bridged the gap between humans and the wild creatures that lived just beyond their doorsteps. And as the seasons changed, the memory of that summer afternoon, when a bear had saved a little girl, remained a powerful symbol of the strength of the heart and the bonds that tie all living things together.
Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please comment 1. And if you didn't, just hit like. See you in the next videos.